The movie begins with Cairo, an 18-year-old girl, narrating her journey into adulthood. Living alone because her lawyer parents are permanently abroad, she finds solace in writing and yearns for love and companionship. She mentions meeting a teacher who is also a writer. Cairo walks into class where Jonathan Miller, a literature teacher, is already present, even though class won't start for another hour. She tells him she lives in Level Hill, which amazes him. He gives her a list of books for the class, and she impresses him by saying she has read them all. Soon, her friend Winnie joins them, and we learn it's her second time attending this class. Her stomach growls, so she and Carol go out to get food. After they leave, Jonathan checks out the books Cairo brought. His friend and colleague Boris arrives and asks what he's reading. Jonathan is holding an erotic fiction book, which Boris takes and starts reading aloud. Jonathan takes the book back and goes to eat the biscuits Boris made. Boris finds Jonathan's book from Cairo and tells him she is the only one who checked it out. Back at their house, Beatrix is buried in her work as Jonathan tries to get her attention. He tells her about Cairo and the book she reads, mentioning that she checked out his book from the library. Beatrix mocks him, then gets a call from Amy. Jonathan leaves to play some music as Beatrix gets angry over the phone. They share a drink, and Jonathan starts reciting lines from a book called Under the Roofs of Paris as he kisses her. They start dancing and making out, but Beatrix's phone rings, and she has to leave. Boris complains about having a terrible weekend as he and Jonathan sit on the court. They look towards the woods, and Boris tells him there could be ghosts there, and the plant feeds on the souls of the dead. Cairo walks out of the woods and greets them. They ask her questions, and Boris offers her some biscuits before leaving, mocking Jonathan. Jonathan asks if she isn't scared walking through the woods alone, but she replies that she's the scariest thing in there. As Boris walks into the hallway, Winnie stops him and starts teasing him. She tells him she wants to be in his class and asks if he can tutor her. Cairo watches them from a corner. Winnie tells Cairo she is seducing Boris and asks if she is jealous. Winnie and Cairo are at Cairo's house while Winnie is smoking. Winnie asks where her parents are, and Cairo says she doesn't know how long they'll be away. Winnie asks Cairo to let her dress her up, saying she can be both smart and hot. Cairo is writing an essay to get into Yale but struggles to answer a question about her greatest achievement. Winnie tries to help, but they can't find the right answer. Winnie finally tells her to experience something worth writing about. Cairo asks if Winnie really plans to sleep with Boris, and Winnie says she wants an older man for her first time. Winnie tells Cairo that Jonathan looks at her differently from other students, but Cairo doesn't believe it. In class, Cairo keeps looking at Jonathan, who then asks her to see him after school. Boris is in Jonathan's class asking about Beatrix in the book she's writing. He is invited for dinner, and Jonathan tells him to shower before coming over. After Boris leaves, Jonathan plays music and starts dancing. He finds Cairo giggling when he turns around. They sit on the couch, and Jonathan asks if she's been to the scroll sessions at Sally Bunny's poetry salon in a Victorian village. He tells her to go the coming weekend. He wanted to see her because of a story she wrote about a reluctant spider. He recites some lines from the story, then tells her she is talented and offers her a jump start on the midterm. He assigns her to write a short story in the style of her favorite author, saying it could help with her portfolio for Yale. Cairo tells Jonathan she read his book and calls it a grand and tragic romantic horror, quoting lines from it. He tells her it was the first thing he wrote, and that he hasn't written anything recently since getting married and starting teaching. Cairo challenges him, saying he isn't inspired. When he joins them as they are talking, Boris, Jonathan, and Beatrix go out for dinner where Winnie is the waitress. Beatrix asks why their order isn't served yet, and Winnie offers a drink on her. Boris and Winnie sneer at each other, and Winnie calls Jonathan a boring teacher, making Boris laugh. Jonathan tells Beatrix that Winnie is Cairo's friend before they discuss her. Beatrix tells Jonathan he is better at teaching than writing and that writing isn't for him. They both tell him it's not because he can't write that he's not a writer, it's because he stopped writing and chose to be a teacher. Jonathan is offended. On Saturday, Cairo goes to the poetry place Jonathan suggested, hoping to find him there. Soon, Jonathan joins her. She asks if he knows all the people there and if what they're doing is like group therapy. A man named Elliot starts reciting a play, and they all listen. After the play, Jonathan and Cairo are outside, and he asks if she thought it would be bad. She says yes while giggling. Boris and Jonathan are sitting in their usual place when Cairo brings them coffee. Boris offers her a biscuit he made, and she suggests he sells them to raise money for his team, offering to help with Jonathan in school. Jonathan gets a text from Beatrix. One weekend, Cairo suggests a trip. She and Winnie swing by Jonathan's class, catching him in a hurry to leave. He mentions his plans with his wife, and Cairo seeks his approval for her chosen midterm writer. After a brief chat, he leaves. Winnie teases Cairo about how she spoke to Jonathan while sitting on his desk, and Boris enters, overhearing their discussion. He agrees with their biscuit baking idea and asks for their help. Winnie requests his number for easier communication. She places Boris's phone in her chest after calling Cairo, but he retrieves it. Jonathan waits for Beatrix to finish up when Cairo calls him on her phone, which he had in his bag. She asks him to drop it at her place. It's raining when he arrives, and they share a kiss in the pouring rain. Cairo, back at her house, watches television, reminiscing, while Jonathan sits with Beatrix, who apologizes for canceling their vacation due to work. After receiving Cairo's midterm assignment, Jonathan reads her intimate story that portrays them. Overwhelmed, he pleases himself while reading. On Monday, Cairo waits in Jonathan's class, but he greets her coldly, telling her to choose another author due to the inappropriateness of her story. He questions her choice, and she explains it's about them. Despite her defense, he insists on a new story. Cairo urges him to stop talking to her like a stranger and explain, leading to a heated exchange where he threatens to fail her. She retaliates, calling his writing bad and labeling him a nobody, impotent and mediocre, while daring him to fail her. Heartbroken, she leaves, comparing it to a car crash. Cairo returns home, drinking and crying with Winnie. Jonathan, at home, tells Beatrix about his bad day in the conversation with Cairo. Intrigued, Beatrix reads Cairo's story and makes Jonathan recite how Cairo described him. Meanwhile, Cairo asks Winnie to distract her by texting Boris, saying she's drunk. Jonathan recites lines from Cairo's story as Beatrix seduces him, stopping only when Boris enters. Winnie tells Cairo she wants Boris to like her and sleep with her, leading to Cairo instructing her to text him, claiming they're doing what girls do when alone at night. Beatrix finds Boris smiling at his phone, suspecting something, but he keeps it secret. Winnie's text angers Cairo, prompting Winnie to remove her shirt for Boris, who gets sent a photo. Earlier, Cairo had sent her story to the principal. Beatrix hands Jonathan a call from the principal, and Boris abruptly leaves. Jonathan informs Beatrix about the principal getting Cairo's story, worrying about his job if Cairo convinces them of their affair. Beatrix questions the inappropriateness between them. In the following days, Cairo's absence makes Winnie sad. She asks Jonathan about Cairo, but he denies seeing her. Cairo and Jonathan face questioning from Principal Joyce. Cairo reveals Jonathan gave her the assignment early, and they often met to discuss literature. Jonathan defends their mentor-student relationship, mentioning returning her phone in their canceled vacation, insisting nothing inappropriate happened. Boris confronts Jonathan about his feelings for Cairo, leading to an argument. Jonathan tells Beatrix he's suspended, and a fight ensues where she calls him boring and an alcoholic. When he confronts Cairo, who plans to testify against Jonathan before the school board, feeling underestimated, Winnie threatens to testify against Cairo, who blackmails her with evidence of her and Boris. Cairo sees this as her greatest achievement. The movie concludes with Cairo reading her essay about her and Jonathan, showing Jonathan losing his job, Boris and Winnie passing each other like strangers, and Cairo finding Jonathan at school crying. Despite her hurt, she believes the events have shaped her into something new. A hero, a villain, and a writer. The movie ends here.